Walking. Bondage. The Bionic Woman. Product placement. Facial tics. Baby cocktail shakers. Scud.
It's just supposed to make you feel in control.
Weaponized urination. Shit weather. One eye.
You need a name, and you've only got one eye.
Snot monsters. A batshit crazy plot.
発揮させていくっていう、そういうものづくりですね。
Fantastic.
Welcome to Death Stranding. A game that's madder than a box of frogs. Spoiler alert. I have tried my best to avoid direct references or footage that contain spoilers. However, this video does contain unavoidable spoilers. You have been warned. Trigger alert. I am acutely aware that Hideo Kojima and the Metal Gear franchise are revered and much loved by loyal fans. Please be assured that throughout this video I will endeavour to be as deferential and respectful as I am humanly capable of. Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding is one of the most hyped and anticipated games of recent years. It's the first release from his company Kojima Productions since their acrimonious split from Konami. It's an open world, third-person, asymmetrically online, action-ish kind of exploration game. And this will be a theme. Death Stranding is almost and kind of many things. Quite exactly what it is, well, that's another story altogether. I'll say right now, I'm not a Kojima fanboy, which will bite me in both arse cheeks, no doubt. Fanboys will flame me for any criticism. Haters will flame me for any compliments. The important thing for everyone to be aware of here is that I have an open mind. I don't have any skin in this game, and I have zero fucks invested either way. Initially I thought this game was going to be simple to review. It's a game that simulates mindlessly staggering around, carrying boxes, trying not to fall the fuck over. As someone who spends a lot of time staggering around drunk, trying not to fall over, usually carrying takeaway boxes of food whilst I'm doing it, I thought this game would be easy to review because of my innate experience. But this was not to be the case. Death Stranding has already taken on the significance of being more than just a game. It's a valiant and noble enterprise crafted by a legendary video game designer, recently freed from the shackles of his greedy corporate overlords, finally left unrestrained to make precisely whatever game he desires, without any external creative interference, financial restriction, or artistic meddling. Well, that sounds like a recipe for fucking disaster right there. Oh, a quick note. Hideo Kojima apparently does not speak English, so in the unlikely event he does watch this video, that means there will be someone in the room translating my words into Japanese. I am specifically addressing that translator when I say this. It's probably a good idea if you don't tell him exactly what I'm saying. Just keep babbling shit about how I said he was the greatest video game designer of all time, how much I respect his work, and how I loved all the Metal Gear Solid games that I never actually fucking played. Just don't tell him the truth about what I'm saying. It will be bad for me, and it will certainly be worse for you, because you will be in the room with him when he blows his fucking stack. You're a translator, right? You already take one set of words and change them into Another set of words. Think of this as just being an extension of that role. Blow smoke up his arse whilst I get my job done. Play this right and we both might make it out of here in one piece. But before I discuss the game itself, we need to examine the history and the legacy of Hideo Kojima so that we can better understand the context of Death Stranding and the circumstances surrounding its creation. I will try and do my best to stay true to the facts and respect the legacy of one of the greatest developers and creative designers in video game history. So where better place to start but with a quick biography of the venerable and legendary Hideo Kojima. So who is Hideo Kojima? Hideo Wolf Boy Kojima was born in 1963 in Tokyo, Japan. Japan is a small island nation situated about 2 inches to the right of Winnie the Pooh land, on my map at least. Japan is a noble country famed for its rich and imaginative culture. They invented schoolgirl prostitution, suicide, creepiness, bathing in pork soup, holiday camps, unsolicited groping on public transport, electronic shitting, bukkake, and eating slugs. They ban women from wearing spectacles at work because apparently it makes them look evil. They pioneered international collaboration in engineering. The official Japanese religion is weeaboo, and for a while the nation's favourite television show was Endurance, where every week Takeshi Kitano would literally subject the contestants to prolonged and agonising physical and mental torture, because apparently pouring gasoline over people and pulling them through hoops of burning fire is considered family-friendly entertainment in the land where they sell used ladies' underpants in fucking vending machines. I don't know about you, but I think I've just convinced myself to move there. Into this cosmopolitan hellscape, the baby Kojima was born, abandoned by his mother and left in a cardboard sushi box outside a hospital. He was snatched by a pack of stray dogs before the nurses could reach him. Raised on the streets as part of the pack and suckled on the milk of wild lady dogs, Kojima grew up dirty and naked, surviving by stealing noodles from the unconscious drunk businessmen who had passed out on the pavements outside of karaoke bars. Between stolen meals, he would sit outside electronics goods shops at night, watching the movies play silently on the wall of TV screens, dreaming that one day he might become a film director. However, Kojima's life as a dirty child hobo came to an abrupt end when he was rescued from the streets by a passing troupe of travelling clowns. Despite their initial enthusiasm at training the young Kojima, it proved impossible. His upbringing had left him without certain basic essential social skills. When they discovered him trying to seal a small child into a plastic jug of fluid, his career as a clown abruptly came to an end. Kojima's downward spiral continued from this point. He had gone from street urchin to children's entertainer, but things were going to get progressively worse. He then started training to be a dancer for a Japanese TV show, but failed to pass the final audition. He took work as a stripper in an attempt to bring in some cash, but he proved to be a failure at that too. After being sacked from his job as a toilet cleaner, he eventually realised that despite his expansive imagination and tenacity, he lacked the socialisation and interpersonal skills to maintain even the most mundane employment in Japanese society. He had hit rock bottom, and almost inevitably he resigned himself to becoming a Japanese video game designer. Signing up for a job at the monolithic Mega Gaming Corp Konami, after a few false starts, he eventually proved to be moderately competent, working on games such as Snatcher, Policenauts. Then he moved on to a few vaguely memorable titles like 10 Metal Gear games, which pretty much put Konami on the map, redefined video gaming, and created the entirely new genre of stealth action adventure game. Because computers at the time couldn't handle combat, apparently. It's safe to say Kojima managed to squeeze out the odd bit of work between naps. Then, inexplicably in 2015, Hideo Kojima famously fell out of favour with Hideki Hayakawa, president of Konami, ruthless business fuck, and renowned wanker. Hayakawa felt the future of Konami lay with more lucrative, worthy and productive activities, like kiddie gambling, and being a psychopath to his loyal staff. Allegedly, Konami felt that Kojima had a persistent habit of pursuing overly complicated, self-indulgent, sprawling video game concepts and turning them into bloated, over-budget, self-indulgent passion projects. I don't believe it. Kojima was unceremoniously marched out of the building, clutching a box filled with his personal possessions cleared from his desk. His lucky desk pillow, his noodle fan, and a folder containing the script and the pre-production plans for Silent Hills. In the immediate aftermath of his sacking, Kojima felt angry and betrayed. His first response was to fake medical qualifications and get a job as a rectal examiner in the closest doctor's surgery outside Konami headquarters. Whilst this provided him with a sinister sense of satisfaction and sated his lust for revenge, he was feeling, nevertheless, spiritually unfulfilled. In his defence, however, having 2 fingers aggressively rammed up your arse was significantly less unpleasant than playing Metal Gear Survive, the first video game that Konami released without Hideo Kojima at the helm. But then, in a flash, a plan came to him. Suddenly remembering that he was a multi-millionaire that owned his own video game development company, Kojima Productions, why not make his own game, by his own rules, where he could have full creative control and answer to nobody? Death Stranding was born, and the rest, as they say, was all downhill from there.
Everything's true. Except for all the lies.
So what is Death Stranding? Death Stranding is Hideo Kojima's vast, sprawling, convoluted passion project. The core of the game revolves around a post-apocalyptic America ravaged by some kind of primal extinction event that has caused a disintegration of the fabric that separates realities, time, the worlds of the living and the dead, and generally makes life rather unpleasant, dangerous and short. Putting the highbrow concepts on the shelf for a moment, how this plays out on the ground is this. The world's fucked. When people die, they explode like fucking Hiroshima, so they have to be incinerated ASAP. The world is overrun with a selection of ghostly or gooey fuckbeasts that appear to be destructive manifestations of the souls of the dead, and when it rains, contact with the rainwater accelerates time and ages and degrades anything it touches. Humans are clinging to the rock of survival and trying to reintegrate the remaining outposts of humanity by building a chiral network that will allow them to join the dots between these remote settlements and cities and start rebuilding again. You know, I guess it's a little bit like rolling out high-tech broadband, only with a lot less porn. Unfortunately. The majority of the remaining population, well, those with any fucking common sense that is, reside in vast underground cities, only communicating with the surface via holographic telecom systems. The people they almost exclusively communicate with are porters. They are basically masochists who wander around on the surface, trudging from outpost to outpost, delivering the parcels that the underfolk, hiding safely underground, require for their cowardly survival. Because even the apocalypse isn't lethal enough to kill off the shitty menial gig economy, apparently. You play the part of one such fuckhead who voluntarily works as a porter, physically carrying shit around the beautiful yet dangerous fuckscape, trying to help bring the world together by delivering people's stuff, because most people are quite sensibly too shit scared to leave the relative safety of the cities, where they can cower and shit themselves in their gated communities, whilst the poor folk outside do all the hard work and dying for them. Some things never change, I guess. The basic activities see you engage in primarily point-to-point missions, traversing the landscape, collecting, delivering and rescuing supplies. You eventually get access to vehicles, but a lot of the landscape is so rugged that hoofing it on foot is often the most practical solution. You can set up traversal routes through impassable terrain using mechanical expanding ladders and ropes, like those Sherpas that do the most dangerous work on the Khumbu Icefall, setting up the ladder crossing so that those rich tourist fuckers can pay a couple of $100,000 to get carried up Everest, taking selfies of themselves in front of the dead bodies and empty oxygen bottles that litter the side of the mountain. As the game advances, you get access to better logistical support gear and structures, the ability to build stuff out in the wilds with 3D printers, and generally embark on a quest to tame the wild landscape and reconnect the disparate settlements and bring everyone back on grid. Managing the cargo is a central game mechanic, the primary tension being between weight and utility. It's basically like packing a bug-out bag. Do you travel light, fast and agile, but leave potentially useful stuff behind, like booze and porn? Or do you pack absolutely every last bit of shit you possibly can, but end up so overloaded and unstable that you can barely take a step without blowing out both your kneecaps and face planting into a ditch? These decisions are compounded by the treacherousness of the terrain and the hostiles you might encounter on the way. There are supernatural, sinister and plain crazy enemies, all trying to fuck with you. Being able to put your running away pants on is important, so don't carry too much. Carry too little and you have to take more trips or take longer routes because you don't have that useful ladder you left behind. It's a balancing act, literally and figuratively. You carry around a stillborn baby because Japan, which brings you back from the dead when you die. Personally, I like the idea of keeping babies in plastic pods. It certainly would keep the noise and stink contained. Frankly, if I ever suffered the misfortune of sporting offspring, I would prefer to keep them in sealed pods until they were grown up and old enough to start full-time employment. Just store them in the basement and send them to the employment centre when they reach the age of 12. Job done. There is also optional asymmetrical online gameplay. Although you don't directly interact with other players, your actions and the actions of others can bleed into a shared game reality, so you can end up finding and using ladders and resources, kindly left there by other randoms playing the game. I'd say it's optional, but it's optional in the sense that you can theoretically turn it off if you're a complete fucking antisocial masochist who wants to do everything the hard way. Helping other players earns you a reward in the form of likes, and you can give them in return. The story weaves a thread through all of this, attempting to give meaning to the big sweep of the game and your motivation for connecting the threads of humanity together. There are many comments and memes about this being a package delivery simulator or a walking simulator, but there is a subtle distinction to be made here. These game mechanics are a means to an end and not an ends in themselves. The goal of the game is not to walk around delivering parcels. You just end up having to do it a lot. And I mean a lot. Although, as someone else wisely commented, if Death Stranding really is just a walking simulator, then at least it's the best one that's ever been made. For some people, this game is going to be an experiential, transcendental journey of exploration and discovery. For a lot of people, this game is going to be an appallingly boring, laborious journey of soul-crushing tedium, where they discover they just pissed away 50 quid on a walking simulator, which lacks a cohesive and comprehensible plot. This will depend largely on the individual. I liken the sensation of playing this game to hunting for animal pelts in the Grizzly Mountains in Red Dead Redemption 2. People laugh in my face when I tell them I've spent days and days just hunting in the beautiful, bleak, snowy terrain of the north. I understand it's not everyone's idea of fun, but I could truly get lost in the game just hunting for days. Death Stranding is part game, part movie, it's part experience and part self-indulgent fuck-up. According to Kojima, it's about the journey and not the destination. Yeah, well, that statement right there might come back to bite him in the cock, because it means two entirely different things depending on whether you like or hate this game. So let's talk functionality and fuckery. How well is the game made, and is it made to fuck you over? Personally, I thought this was a very well constructed game mechanically. It was polished, worked straight out of the box. I have had zero stability issues and no problems to report. It does a great job of holding your hand as you learn the game. The systems become increasingly complicated and convoluted, but the game handles it well. Like all well thought through games, it rolls out functionality as you progress and advance. So as you gain competency, knowledge and expertise, you gain more abilities and the game becomes more complex. Some of the vehicle physics is a bit shit. Nothing crazy happens. It's not Battlefield levels of vehicle spinning, plane bouncing, anti-fucking gravity. It's just some of the vehicles ride like its physics need a rework. However, my main gripe with the construction of the game is that the fantastic soundtrack, which is so central to the narrative feel of Death Stranding, is not copyright safe. They did not buy out the rights. So any music leaking into a YouTube video or a live stream will get you instantly twatted with a copyright strike. Credit where credit is due. One other publisher very brilliantly introduced copyright safe music only as a function in the options. You could literally click the button and it would turn off any music that wasn't copyright safe. I will not, however, be telling you who did that, because the scabby, vicious little shitfucks hit me with a malicious copyright strike over something else completely. So they could eat a bucket of dicks as far as I'm concerned. You reap what you sow, I guess. Death Stranding also scores a very low 2.9 on the fuckery scale. There were no microtransactions, pedo caches or in-game store. There were a few trivial pre-order rewards like an avatar and a gold skin or some shite, but overall it was inoffensive. There are, however, some absolutely fucking bollock-slapping, immersion-breaking product placements. Monster Energy Drink is a fucking consumable in the game. I mean, just what the actual fuck? Look, I'm a fan of Vaseline and bleach, but I wouldn't want to constantly see my two regular brands advertised in my video games. Besides, even cursory research of Monster reveals they have a rather sinister reputation. Currently 5 women are suing senior executives for sexual harassment. I don't know factually if there is any basis for these claims in law, but one of the executives has allegedly resigned over the allegations, and another former executive is allegedly awaiting trial for strangling his girlfriend who worked there. Add to this their alleged reputation as a massive corporate bully, and it seems pretty clear to me. I don't think this game and Monster Energy Drink is a particularly good fit for each other. There is also the repeated placement of a bizarre advert for Norman Reedus' AMC show, Ride with Norman Reedus, which pops up every time you take a shit. It's just fucking odd. Some people have complained that there are, quote, immersion-breaking cameos. But personally, I thought all the actors and voice actors were absolutely spot on, and Norman Reedus, playing the part of the stoic, barely speaking hero, was good casting and a perfect choice. Let's face it, I'm sure the job advertisement for the porter did not read, "Wanted, sociable communicator who loves the company of others, needed for a job where you get fucked off into the wilderness to be all alone." My only gripe was that the females in the game seemed so fucking skinny and emaciated that they would snap if you sneezed on them. Structurally, there is no escaping the fact that this game has a lot of forced, slow transitions and cutscenes. They are all clearly, intentionally designed for immersion and to maintain the pace and cinematic quality of the gameplay experience. Nevertheless, if you are not the kind of person who plays this kind of game with a whiskey, soaking up the vibes and relaxing, the drawn-out cutscenes might start to chafe your ballsack after your 50th to 100th cutscene. So let's commence our in-depth evaluation of Death Stranding. One of the first rules they teach you in Video Game Journalism Training Academy is that you must say Hideo Kojima is a living legend. And if you want people to think you are super clever, you had better name drop that motherfucker whenever you can. It's just like the film director Akira Kurosawa at film school. You are obligated to pretend he's one of the greatest movie directors of all time, even if you think his films are boring and too long. I am a fan of Akira Kurosawa, and I own some of his movies. And I can tell you this, anyone who says that none of his movies are too long and too boring is either an idiot, pretentious, or a fucking liar. Seven Samurai is 3.5 hours long, black and white, and it has subtitles. I reckon you could shave half an hour off that fucker without compromising its integrity. My point is, Death Stranding has confused the fuck out of the video game journalism community because nobody wants to make a fool of themselves, because it's the video game event of the year, made by one of the most famous video game directors of all time. That is why there are so many reviews where people say, it's good, but it's also bad, and then give it a really high score out of 10 regardless. Because Sony advertising budget. Most mainstream outlets are hedging their bets. A few reviewers have come out and said they absolutely love it or think it's a fucking mess. And credit to them. Every so often a game comes out that befuddles the reviewing community. Let's face it, when reviewers aren't being paid off by publishers to just promote games, on those rare occasions they are actually trying to be objective. They also, let's be honest with ourselves, also try and be popular. YouTubers have an audience to please, and this influences their reviews. They don't want to shit all over a game and alienate their audience, and they don't want to praise a despised game and look like a fucking idiot. So when a game comes out that is not a dopamine generating thrill fest, that is hard work and slow to gratify, usually they all get totally discombobulated. Kingdom Come Deliverance was the last game I saw do this. Lots of reviewers got completely confused and hedged their bets. Said stuff like, it's a noble project, but it's boring. People are doing exactly the same with Death Stranding. It's hard work, not instantly gratifying. It's outside the comfort zone, involves a lot of doing work and diverges from the usual genre stereotypes. And what are loads of the reviewers saying? You fucking guessed it. It's a noble project, but it's boring. Eventually, when all the votes were in and the dust had settled, people realised that Kingdom Come Deliverance was actually a masterpiece. However, I'm not sure it's so clear-cut with Death Stranding, despite its merits. The game is not instantly and regularly gratifying, and many games these days rely on the constant rapid cycle of giving a little reward for a little effort, like giving dog treats and using a clicker when you're training a puppy. And I use that example very literally and deliberately because that is precisely the psychological mechanisms at play. Games like Kingdom Come Deliverance and also Death Stranding to a degree show that a lot of players have more tenacity and longer attention spans than that. They can work hard for deferred gratification and sometimes for none at all. This is a genuinely cinematic game and partially a cinematic experience, and this is going to significantly affect people's enjoyment and experience of the game. If a player is looking for a repeated dopamine hit from a fast, repetitive action reward cycle, well, they ain't going to get it. The rewarding aspects of this game are on the big sweep, not the hamster wheel. Your preferences as a player and your expectations as a customer are going to positively or negatively impact your enjoyment of Death Stranding. That's a posh way of saying that some people are going to fire this game up and like it. Some people are going to fire up this game with incorrect expectations and as a result hate it. And other people are just going to fucking hate it. I think this game is wonderfully refreshing, original and creative. I personally really enjoyed playing it. However, it's a niche product with limited appeal, and the script is a self-conscious, unfinished fuck pie. In fact, we can't really judge the script, because we've never seen the finished script. Nobody has, because they didn't finish it. When they came to editing the script, they were so unsure and self-conscious, they said, fuck it, leave everything in, just in case. In fact, imagine playing this game and loading up your character with every last single bit of kit until his legs are about to snap, and then you sent him off to his destination, buckling under his own weight. That's the metaphor for this script right there. It's like an overloaded porter. It was right there in front of them, and they didn't see the joke. It must be hard working as a script editor under the boss man of video games, and having the balls to reel him in. But the story did contradict itself at times, was convoluted, and was at times bloated as all fuck. This game didn't kill its darlings. In fact, at points it's like someone edited two different scripts into one giant, huge script that contradicts itself. There are parts of the story where I think they really didn't feel confident enough in their own explanation, so they tried to bamboozle the audience by chucking science words at the player's face in an attempt to distract them. At times the best way I can explain it is this: it's like someone who always explains the punchline after they tell a joke. You know, that awkward scenario where all the fun of the joke is spoiled by the unnecessary explanation afterwards, when people should just be left to enjoy the laughter. Only on this occasion, the audience didn't understand the joke, and the explanation doesn't make sense. And a lot of people aren't fucking laughing. There was a reason why Twin Peaks worked. It might have been the most batshit crazy detective story ever that had physics, visions, messages from other galaxies, and possession. But it worked because they didn't over-explain everything. The core of the story in Death Stranding is mostly good. The basis of the game lore is original and fascinating. The problem is that it's as bloated as Jabba the fucking Hutt. Contradictory, and at times so over-explained it sounds like an exposition scene from Star Trek. Fuck, I was literally waiting for them to start talking about flux capacitors or fucking Jeffries tubes. There are issues raised about the legitimate complexity of the story world. Some of the weird sci-fi seems legit, but some of it seems like nonsense, inserted just to obfuscate what's going on, and create opportunities for people to not quite understand and imprint their own meanings and interpretations. Basically random shit that people will seize on to cook up their own spin-off conspiracy theories about explaining what's really going on, so they can argue about it for the next 20 years on the internet. I'm stupid and usually half pissed, so I don't fucking know. Maybe, maybe not, but I'll just say this. I once watched a David Lynch film and didn't understand a fucking thing that was going on and thought it was a pile of fuck. Then someone explained all the symbolism and narrative in the film, and suddenly it made complete sense. I still think the film was a pile of fuck, but the point is that just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's necessarily nonsense. Similarly, just because something has artistic pretensions and is full of symbolism doesn't mean it's not a pile of fuck. That's why lots of people adore the movie The Straight Story, but had probably never heard of Mulholland Drive. And just for the record, Hideo Kojima himself said at one point that he didn't understand Death Stranding. I'm not sure how literally he meant that when he said it, but you know, I'll just leave that right here. Make no mistake though, visually, Hideo Kojima might well be Terrence Malick, but structurally he is Quentin Tarantino. Fuck, maybe with a little bit of Ed Wood thrown in both a pejorative and non-pejorative sense. There is a thin line between surrealism and wackiness, and I'm not convinced Kojima knows the fucking difference. This game has lofty narrative aspirations on a par with early David Lynch, and it succeeds in parts. But let's keep it fucking real here. The conceptual scattergun approach and random appropriation of ideas just kept reminding me of Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino grabs lots of cool stuff all the time and elements of pop culture and recombines them into something new and entertaining. Well, in his earlier films at least. This is not strictly the same process as a genuine artistic creator like Lynch. One is primarily a process of collection and assembly, and the other, creation. Death Stranding is more about engineering than scripting. Kojima just keeps frantically grabbing lots of cool sci-fi and pop culture ideas and frantically gluing them on, based on the assumption that more is always better. Let's be honest, it does start to get a bit fucking mental after a while, as more and more is thrown into the pot. The apocalypse, the afterlife, time travel, the multiverse, teleporting umbrellas, monster energy drinks, grenades made out of urine, ropes made out of blood, bombs made out of shit, ride with AMC, existential philosophical statements that are literally contradicted a few seconds later. Calm the fuck down, Kojima. It's like someone went into their favourite clothes shop, bought every single item they liked, and put them all on at the same time. I did absolutely love the climbing and traversing mechanics. I'm not entirely sure why, but I thoroughly enjoyed the whole process of navigating dangerous and impassable terrain, using ladders and ropes, whilst perilously standing on the edge of dangerous cliff edges. Maybe I've watched too many climbing documentaries, but there was a real challenge to deploying your kit in a cunning and efficient way, so that you could turn a dangerous, rocky obstruction into a traversable travel route for yourself and others. Perhaps that subtle point is one of the reasons a relatively mundane mechanic takes on such meaning. Laying down your own path of ladders and ropes is not hard, but doing it efficiently and optimally in the complex and irregular terrain can become a bit obsessive. And then there is the fact that you're doing it not just for yourself, but for your asymmetrically online buddies, whose gratitude you indirectly receive. It's not just about you overcoming the hurdle. It can also be about doing it in a way that is either safe or dangerous for the players that come behind you and decide to use your structures, based on trust. The enemy encounters were a mixed bag. Most bad guys can be taken down with stealth or entirely avoided using even more stealth, or just punched in the fucking kisser. The general reception, however, is that the combat is, for want of a better word, shitty. A big part of the game is soaking up the atmosphere, and I think that would be spoiled if you were constantly on a hair trigger to shit your pants and drop into full combat mode. I think the choice to make the combat mostly avoidable and fairly easy is actually a good thing. My logic is this: if you had to play this whole game on a heightened state of alert, gun in hand, on DEFCON 1, stealthing from rock to rock, it would be stressful and frankly unpleasant. I like a bit of stealth gameplay as much as the next paranoid crack fiend, but I'm not sure I would enjoy 50 to 100 hours of shitting my pants, hiding behind rocks, completely ignoring the beautiful scenery and music because I was too fucking terrified to lift my head and soak up the vibes. Talking of which, the music in the game was sublime. It's a genuine soundtrack that fitted the game as film concept that Kojima is striving for. I shit you not, I had a genuine, memorable video game moment playing Death Stranding. I crested the brow of a hill after a tense journey. The scenery came into view, the sun came out, and the music fired up, and I trudged down into the valley. It was literally a beautiful, perfect, emotional gaming moment that I won't forget. We need more of that. Genuinely. It's shameful to say, but over the last few years, the majority of my unforgettable emotional memories of video games have involved things like frustrating game instability, bugged missions, lost progress, undelivered DLC that I prepaid for, publishers abandoning their live service game, or discovering I can't get a refund, even though the game is basically fucked at launch. If Death Stranding only gives the player that one moment, it's doing something most games can't do at all these days. I think Death Stranding does a good job of grasping the metaphor of connection, which is a classic staple of post-apocalyptic culture. America is a nation built from scratch, and connectivity is a primary theme of the civilizing project. America was really built by railroads, telegrams and the postal service. There is a reason why colonizing countries build that shit first. Infrastructure is the precursor to civilization. Without that, a country is just a collection of villages, and maybe the word collection is implying a sense of affiliation where none exists. However, why in the name of fuck did they take this metaphor, grab a stencil, and spray paint it over every single aspect of the game? The ropes, the routes, the roads, and the connectivity all make sense. But they never stop. The cities are called knots. A character called Fragile, a dude called Die Hard Man, a company called Bridges, ID made from rope. It never fucking stops. Maybe this heavy-handed metaphor bombing is a cultural issue, and this is about things getting lost in translation. This said, it does all get rather ridiculous with the shit and piss grenades. Not even kidding, you can literally weaponise your turds. In the interest of full transparency, this is a concept that I'm not entirely unfamiliar with, in the real world at least, but doing it within a video game is an entirely novel experience. I think it's a bit silly though, hurling shit grenades at people. Regardless of the stunningly logical justification, believe it or not, it's just guaranteed to come off as childish. I mean, come on, they're actually called number 1 and number 2 grenades. Get it? That joke wouldn't pass muster at your granddad's birthday party. Look, it's one thing to throw a bottle of your piss at someone at a music festival, but weaponising it? Seriously? If there was any feasible way to turn a bottle of piss into an explosive, I would have figured it out by now myself. Trust me. On a positive note, I might be a member of the PC Master Race, but I think this is a game uniquely suited to console, partially because of the balance and terrain traversing mechanics. I think the hands-on feel of the controller combined with the constant haptic feedback provide excellent enhancements to the game. I'm sure it will be great on PC too, but it's a game built from the ground up for a controller and a big TV screen in my opinion. The gear micromanagement is definitely a thing, but personally I didn't see the negatives at all, and it was a great mechanic where you have to constantly balance the weight of your load against your desire to be stable on your feet and move quickly. There are a lot of people complaining that the micromanagement of your loads is a ball ache, but this is not really true. If you decide to manually do it, it's a minigame in its own right. However, there is a button you can press to automatically optimise all the gear you are carrying instantly. So anyone complaining about the load distribution being tiresome is either full of shit or can't find the triangle button on their fucking controller. Frankly, I think it's a bit rich to call it micromanagement at all. It's just managing your loadout. It's not that hard to do adequately, and if you are struggling with the basic mechanic, press the Help Me Mummy button on the controller and the game will wipe your bum for you, and auto-sort your gear optimally in a second. It's worth noting the basic game mechanics and systems are very easy to grasp, but more sophisticated than I initially realised. After watching a bundle of tips and advanced tips guides, I started to appreciate that you can really dig deep with Death Stranding if you're prepared to do the legwork and master the subtleties of the game mechanics. You can magnify damage on BTs by shooting through grenade splash. You can urinate on certain enemies to neutralise their attack. You can double jump. You can stow gear in safer or less safe locations in your backpack. You can creep your bike forward when you're out of battery power. You can take gear off mules and twat them in the head with it, and find their hidden stashes. Credit to Boomstick Gaming, amongst others, for compiling these guides. My point is, if you really master the game, the mechanics are more sophisticated than you initially realise. I just can't help but think that this game is an opportunity for some cheap laughs for people who don't normally do comedy. I just keep hearing the same old Amazon delivery puns and footage of people loading themselves up to max capacity, then deliberately running over rocky ground to capture footage of themselves falling over like it's some kind of fucking revelation. It's cheap gags. It's lazy humour. Seriously, it's not witty to overload your character, deliberately fuck them over a cliff, and then shout, "Ha ha ha! Look at this game! It's stupid!" It's like reviewing a driving game and deliberately smashing your car into a wall, then screaming, "Hey kids, look, this game must be shit because I just crashed the car." Of course you can. It's a fucking mechanic in the game. Just like getting from point A to point B without fucking yourself over a cliff is a mechanic in Death Stranding. If these immature comedians were as fucking motivated and eager to take the piss out of games as a service, loot boxes, or microtransactions, I would be a happy camper. The gaming industry would be in a much better place if these fucking jokers were shredding the shit state of AAA publishers. But no, they all bust out the same weak single joke about falling over in a game where not fucking yourself down a ditch is important. Seriously. The falling over lols seem like entry-level opportunities for people who normally struggle to get comedy jobs on YouTube. It's the comedic equivalent of making jokes about fat people being fat or poor people being uneducated. It's not really a joke, it's sniping. Really weak shit sniping. "Look, mummy, I can make the little man fall over if I try and make him fall over." Jesus fuck, buy a joke book. To some degree or other, any review is a reflection of the reviewer as much as the thing being reviewed. But Death Stranding is particularly interesting because it's so different and strange that it's really providing a platform for people to grind their gristle, both for and against Hideo Kojima himself. For some long-term critics, they see this hard-to-understand game as an easy opportunity to viciously put the boot in. For a lot of die-hard fanboys, they see this flawed masterpiece as a dutiful opportunity to loyally and blindly defend it whilst ignoring its flaws. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the middle. But perhaps leaning slightly closer to the conclusion that this game is very problematic indeed. I'm sorry, but claiming this game is nothing more than a UPS delivery simulator is dishonest. Just as dishonest as claiming that people who don't enjoy the game are ignorant. Kojima buying into the latter narrative is a huge own goal. It's the cry of every artist who makes something people don't like. But they just don't understand. I guess he has poured his heart and soul into this game and some people just don't get it. But you know, that's life. If you make something new and groundbreaking, not everyone is going to lap it up. I guess he is trying to rationalise it so he can make sense of the situation, but perhaps he should shut his cake-hole whilst he's rationalising, because implying that certain Western audiences don't like this game because they be ignorant, well, that's not doing anyone any favours. I personally thought the themes of connectivity and unification were one of the strongest features of the game, and the game is where they should stay. Veteran commentators like Razorfist have argued that there may be an oblique reference to a MAGA hat in-game. Combine this with Kojima giving interviews where he throws shade on Brexit and Trump, and implies that American audiences just don't understand this game because they're used to intellectually inferior genres, and he risks unnecessarily entangling the game in socio-political shitstorms that it doesn't have to be embroiled in. If he has a point, he should let the game make the point for him.
President Trump right now is building a wall, Kojima tells us. Then you have Brexit, where the UK is trying to leave the EU. And it feels that there are lots of wars and people thinking only about themselves in the world. In Death Stranding, we're using bridges to represent connection. But Razor, you shriek.
Besides, America is the country that gave us Noam Chomsky, Oppenheimer and Howard Zinn. I'm confident that America is intellectually capable enough to wrap their heads around a video game that has hand grenades made out of poopy. Look, I sympathise with Kojima to a point. The criticism must be painful for an artist like Kojima, but even as someone who has no experience as a game designer, my one humble and courteous piece of advice to Kojima right now would be this: shut up. The social strand system, i.e. the in-game online semi-social interaction minigame. One of the more fascinating aspects of the game is the overlap between different players' game environments. Whilst you will never actually see another player, you will collectively interact with them indirectly. Players are clustered into online groups, and aspects of your game world bleed into the reality of other players. Once you connect areas to the chiral network, things that they and you do in the world, like putting up ladders, setting up ropes and building support structures and roads, will be visible in other players' game worlds too. You can even leave warning signs and direction signs to help other players. You all can collectively use, thank and contribute materials to each other's endeavours. You leave your appreciation for others' help in the form of likes, which is basically a form of currency. When I first saw the like mechanic, I breathed a heavy, cynical sigh. I am highly suspicious of social media at the best of times, and only use it out of necessity or obligation in the real world. Generally, I've found there is practically zero direct correlation between someone's social media footprint and the true nature of the darkest recesses of their souls. I have met several people who operate their social media accounts like it's a drunken barroom brawl, who turned out to be the most honourable people you could hope to meet. I've also encountered denizens of the internet who post fluffy pictures of cute babies and espouse the qualities of positivity and kinship, who have turned out to be some of the most sinister, manipulative and sociopathic fucks I have ever seen walk the earth on two legs. So yes, I am suspicious of social media. However, within the confines of the game, it creates a bizarrely satisfying feedback loop. Yes, I wish they'd come up with different terminology for it, but such is life. The likes system makes you feel like you're not entirely alone, even though it's partially an artifice. They said the Death Stranding community was coming across a little bit like a religious cult, are nevertheless incredibly loyal and helpful to each other. So who knows? The asynchronous online aspect of the game is fundamental to its core appeal. It might be a game where your primary activity is questing and delivering packages, but there is a fundamental difference between what you do and what the game is. The metagame of Death Stranding is about rebuilding and reforging connections after the apocalypse, analogous to establishing connected settlements in Fallout 4, the Couriers in Fallout New Vegas, Gordon Krantz in David Brin's book The Postman, or Kevin Costner in the worst fucking adaptation of a book ever made. This is the metagame, and this is what is underlying everything you do in the game, and it's what gives satisfaction. A satisfaction amplified by seeing contributions of other players mesh into the fabric of your reality and manifest as timely help and assistance. Apparently this is a primary intention of Kojima, someone who is quite cynical about the negative online ramifications of the internet and social media. A little contradictory for a guy who's so well practiced at manipulating it to peddle online products. He wanted to create a game where you were not only encouraged to help other players, but you genuinely enjoyed the process and felt encouraged to help others. And you know what? It did kind of work. I'm a salty, cynical bastard, but even I felt gratitude and empathy when some random helped me out in a tight spot with a well-placed ladder or a climbing rope, and I started leaving them out for other people too. However, the questionable decision to model the asymmetrical online element so closely on social media is a problematic issue, and does bring associated baggage with it. Just like in real life, it's as much about appearing to be good to acquire validation as social status as it is about being good. Like the random flags people post at strategic points to farm players for random likes as you run over them. It's got fuck all to do with real player assistance. It's about gaming the system to milk like points. Those random billboard placements with zero utility are the Death Stranding equivalent of posting baby pics or photos of kittens on Twitter to gain social approval. It's not about caring or helping, it's about the narcissistic pursuit of vacuous social approval like it's a fucking competition. I'm not an expert, but the symbol in-game certainly looked like it was directly lifted from Facebook. But you be the judge. But I very much disliked how closely the like mechanic was appropriated in this way. I think it's a matter of personal choice if you use Facebook, and it's not my place to judge. But if I was forced to proffer an opinion, I would simply say I don't use Facebook because it's a narcissistic, insincere shit bubble of fake self-representation and false representation, operated by a guy who has forgotten that he's a fucking human with the express purpose of stripping people of cash, democracy and self-respect so that he can ultimately rule the planet. Not that there will be much left to rule once we have all become a zombie populace of mindless peons with smartphones strapped over our eyes.
And try not to let stuff bother you as much as possible. But it is going to bother you because you're human. And I was human. I am human. Still.
The horrifying reality for a cynical bastard like me, though, is that Kojima might have actually made a game where cooperation is not only rewarded, but you feel a genuine obligation. That is no mean feat. This game encourages you to trade up on favours received. And even though I'm doing a bit of sick up in my mouth whilst I say this, it's actually rather pleasant. On a more optimistic note though, my lack of faith in humanity was somewhat restored by seeing people use the in-game assistance as a form of sinister and smirking sabotage. Chirpy direction signs pointing you directly towards the middle of an enemy ambush. Ropes deliberately set over the edges of cliffs which stopped well short of the ground. And people setting up ladder crossings that tactically stopped just short of the opposite bank of the river so that you would merrily shuffle across them with confidence, only to drop off the end and land in the raging fucking torrent of water. Respect to all those players who tricked me, because you restored my cynicism. I salute you. There is a shit old joke about a stupid fuckhead reading the dictionary. When asked what he thought about it, he replied, "It was a great book, but I didn't understand the plot." Death Stranding is summed up by that joke. This game is being described by Kojima and others as a completely new genre of game, but really it's a bridging point. Great ideas don't usually jump out of a vacuum, bursting forth into existence. Kojima has not really invented a new genre of game. He is trying to formalise one. He has drawn together elements from other games, added the asynchronous online elements similar to Demon Souls, and has at best formally distilled it into a discrete genre and given it a name. A genre that frankly still needs a fucking script editor and a couple of ruthless project managers to get a grip on it. Like the British Army formally introducing light infantry units, you have to remember that the tactics were actually first employed by the picket men during the War of Independence. The Brits just gave it a name, gave them spanky green uniforms and formalised the rules. Kojima has defined Strand games as a genre. I'm not sure it's fair to say he invented it, but I do think it's fair to say that Death Stranding is the first fully functional prototype. Both because it is the first fully blown example, and because just like any prototype, it's not quite ready for mass production yet. I came into this review all ready to take the piss. Seriously, I was confident that this review was going to be a straight up roast. I had all my cliched put downs locked, cocked and ready to rock. I had a box full of UPS delivery guy puns. I had my walking simulator jokes. I had some witty truisms about this is what happens when you let a creative artist run amok without constraint and without anyone around to reel him in. I even prepared to crack some funnies about Kojima being overrated. Well, a day may come when I give this fucker an almighty roasting, but today is sadly not that day, because Death Stranding is a good game by many traditional standards. I don't know if it will be popular, win awards or set sales records, but it's a good game mostly if you like this sort of thing, and personally I thought it was beautiful at times. So I guess the $1 million question is Death Stranding a pile of fuck? Absolutely not. Death Stranding is kind of bad at times, but that's okay, it's got some great bits to it as well. We live in a world full of terrible games because of greed, live service bullshit, microtransactions, pedo caches and kiddie gambling. This game is bad at times because someone was allowed to have full creative freedom and go mad with it, and the end results were a bit mad. Fucking batshit crazy, in fact. But this is okay. It's okay for someone to try their best to make a brilliant game and fuck it up. I'll happily spend my money on that shit, because creative risk should be rewarded, even if it doesn't quite work out. There is also the added bonus that if I ever do get a job as a fucking postman, I will have actually fuck it. I'm going to stop right there. I've managed to get this far without making a single delivery simulator joke, so I might as well carry on to the finishing line. Let's not shit around. In the last few years, most of the video games that have become notorious have become so because they were catastrophic, money-grubbing disasters. Fallout 70 fuck. Ghost Recon fuck point. Star Wars Battle fuck 2. Well, nobody is going to forget Death Stranding in a hurry, and at the very least it's going to be notorious for being a bold and batshit crazy attempt to make something original and beautiful. I am strangely hooked on playing Death Stranding, despite its obvious, glaring flaws. But I'm not typical. I can be OCD and obsessive. I sometimes enjoy gameplay solely based around chilling out. I spent days on end just hunting in Red Dead Redemption 2, for fuck's sake. I enjoyed the settlement building minigame in Fallout 4, and would obsess for weeks over a mechanic that many players hated or simply ignored. I'm not representative of most gamers. A lot of people will find a sublime beauty in this game and be forgiving of its horrific self-indulgences, perhaps out of a frankly legitimate respect of the creative risks taken in this game. But a lot of people will find this game unpalatable, bloated and frankly offensive. They will see this as a failed exercise in self-aggrandizing hype and ham-fisted self-indulgence. It's like someone tried to make the perfect woman but couldn't decide which body parts to pick, so they decided to throw in a few extra of everything just to keep their options open. Sure, all of the parts are nice, but nobody wants to date a girl with 4 legs, 6 different arms, 7 tits, 2 heads and 8 fucking eyes. You have to pick what you keep and what you discard and make it all fit together. Otherwise you end up with a gorgon. Nobody wants to date that. Nobody apart from me wants to date that. The biggest single problem with Death Stranding is that Hideo Kojima has tried to make a masterpiece. That right there is the issue that haunts this game to its very core. You can't set out to create a masterpiece. It's not how this shit works. In the real world, people try and create something better than the last thing they created. Then everyone else gets to decide if it's a masterpiece or not. Almost always deciding it's not. Giotto impressed a pope by just being able to paint a perfect circle freehand. The Vitruvian Man is only 1 foot square and sketched on parchment. And Mad Max was made on a tiny budget and filmed in under 6 weeks. Mastery is not just a matter of scale and budget. A masterpiece cannot be brute forced or bought with a huge budget. A grand project on an epic scale is not the same as a masterpiece. This is a grand project. This is a masterpiece. Kojima Productions should have set out to make their best game yet, not the best game ever made. I know this sounds like an exercise in semantics, but when you look at the bloated and contradictory plot, the spectacular scenery, the fucking dreadful heavy-handed metaphor, and beautiful detailed artwork, I think the evidence speaks for itself. Everything in this game that was compatible with brute force tactics is superb, and everything that required nuance, subtlety, and self-restraint is fucked. It's right there for everyone to see. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.